Sounds good.
G'day, Mike. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and it's great to be able to have this conversation today. Thanks for joining me.
Nice to finally meet you. Well, kind of in person.
Yeah, well, that's right. For those that don't know me, I'm Simon from HiveKeepers, and I've got the micro honey harvester. And I've been reaching out to people like Mike so that I can have conversations and learn more from other beekeepers, especially beekeepers and equipment suppliers from other parts of the world. We're learning a lot when we do that, and we're learning a lot about how customers might respond to us. And Mike, we've been sort of tick-tacking with emails for the last week or so. Do you want to just tell people what your company is and sort of the main sort of customers that you have, and then that gives us a bit of an understanding of how the conversation will go from there.
It's Dancing Bee or Dancing Bee Equipment is a bit of a variety of companies. There's a location in our Ontario province of Ontario, which is the largest province in Canada. That's a huge store. That's a very large hobbyist groups in Ontario, with some commercial components there as well. Where I am here in Manitoba, 96% of the colonies are commercial, so my
Yes.
commercial component is huge. But we also have a lot of hobbyists here, and we try to cater to that. We try to build our business based on what a hobbyist is looking for and how to get business started that way. And then the commercial beekeepers help us keep our costs down because it allows us to buy in volume.
Yeah, of
The
course.
Dancing Bee's been around for I think about 15 years, and I've been with them for 5 years, and this will
Yep.
be my 13th season in the beekeeping industry.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And certainly the work that we've been doing is focused for the recreational hobbyist beekeeper. Those, actually, if I'm really specific with you, Mike, I'd be saying those with sort of five or less beehives. Some people think, well, that's never going to work in our setting. And then I ask a few more questions and I quickly find they've got 50 beehives or 200 beehives. And I'm like, well, I'm not trying to, I have plans, but what we're working on at the moment is certainly in that hobbyist space. So it's great to hear you've got lots of customers in that space because you'll be able to ask questions with them in mind and sort of, I guess, I don't mind the awkward questions, or if you think that there's something really important to people, please ask because it's great to do that. It's great to learn.
Will do.
But maybe I'll just give you a little bit of an idea first about sort of why we've got to this point. And I started beekeeping about 15 years ago myself, just as a hobbyist. I only ever was intending to just keep it as a hobbyist level. And with that, about halfway through that time, so about 8 years ago, I began to get right into it in another way. And what I mean by that is I was starting to look at technologies and innovation and what could be done to change this age-old tradition of beekeeping, because I could already see some things that were either bothering me or bothering others, and I thought there's certainly some things here. And actually, the first thing I did, Mike, back in about 2016, we built some software for beekeepers, and that's where some people might have those that have been around a while, scratchy memory and might go, I've heard of HiveKeepers before, maybe. And we did have some software. And software is really hard to manage, Mike, and organise and to make sure it works all the time for people. And after 3 years of doing that, I was there going, no, I don't think I'll continue with the software side of things. It just got to a point where I realised that wasn't the space I wanted to work in. But what it did do, Mike, I've been over there to the North American Beekeeping Conference. I've been to quite a number of conferences in New Zealand, obviously those here where I am in Australia. And I'd spoken to probably thousands of beekeepers. And there's a few other steps in that journey, but I'll avoid that for today. It's just simply not relevant. But what it did make me realise a few years ago when I was at a bit of a crossroads in this business, honey harvesting can be a hassle for people. And again, reminding you that we're looking at this recreational beekeeper that has only a few hives. There's been solutions that have come and gone, some that are really valued by people, but yet I still felt like there was something missing. So that's why 3 years ago I started working on how do we find a new way for this. And we spent the first year looking at really pulling apart how it's done currently, pulling apart all the different options or mechanisms that we thought might be relevant. But I had a few key personal, I guess, ideas, Mike, how I wanted it to go. And one of those, it had to be quicker. It didn't necessarily have to have huge quantities of honey from the harvest. I wasn't aiming to be able to harvest a box of honey quickly. It was more about supplying what I needed, not what I felt like I had to take from the bees. So there was a bit of that there as well. I find uncapping frames absolutely awful, Mike. I don't know what you have a
Yeah.
chuckle. Is that a common thing from your customers that they'd find that as quite a challenge?
It's a pain point for just about every beekeeper. Initially it's the first pain point you see is, well, somebody might go and do the crush strain method, which the following year really everybody regrets it in year two. But otherwise you're looking at a big expense for an extractor capping. Like there's a bunch of stuff in there, but that uncapping is really like pain point number one for people. And then later on you get other pain points as you grow as a beekeeper. But initially, yeah, cappings, removing cappings is a pain in the butt. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was at. In fact, every time I did it, that was the part that I dreaded the most. And I'd always get my wife into the garage with me, into the shed with me, and say, help, because she was patient. I was not. But she was the best chance of me having any success was having her in there with me. So that was one part. I wanted to see, can we remove uncapping from the puzzle? And the other part of the problem that I saw was it's after the harvest that takes a long time. And what I mean by that is the filtering of the honey. If you want to, like if you're letting it settle, if you're wanting to put it through a couple of strainers, it takes time. And for me, I'd normally let that go overnight, sometimes even longer than that, depending on how the harvest went. And there all of a sudden, 2 days later, you still have your garage full of equipment, full of honey, full of a bit of a sticky mess. And I was wondering how I can change that. I really wanted to find a way to make the cleanup just much easier. So that gives you a rough idea of sort of the direction I was taking of what I was hoping I could do with this. And so that was the first year we spent on trying to find out how we'd work through all of those parts of the puzzle. And then the second year we got to work, and we got, by that I mean we built different prototypes, we built different ideas, even the ones that we weren't sure would work properly, we built them just in case. We're always learning with bees, aren't we? Every day is a learning day with bees. Constantly shocked, as I'm sure you are, about thinking you know what's going on, and reminded that you're just a passenger in this and there's something to learn. So we tested lots of things. And that was good. It actually probably proved that our early work was really good, because we actually ended up testing and learning that our main ideas were really sensible ideas. Anyway, it took quite a few goes though to adjust, to change, to improve before we've done testing with other beekeepers and we've got to where we've got now, which is what I'll show you next. But that's sort of the journey, and we're coming up really soon now. In fact, in 2 weeks today, we launch on Kickstarter with our product. And the reason we do that, Mike, is we haven't gone to manufacture thousands of these yet. It's a really expensive business just to get to where we've got to. So we look to pre-sales through Kickstarter to help us get over the next line. So in 2 weeks from now, we launch. We hope to have lots of customers willing to get involved in this early stage and be part of what we're doing. But shall I show you some of the gear so it sort of makes a bit of sense? So what I wanted to show you first is this is a standard full depth Langstroth frame size, and I wanted to find a way as well where we could just simply slide something into an existing setup. Now at the moment, Mike, I don't have frames that suit all of the different formats of bee boxes that people have out there. We're just working with Langstroth full depth just now. Later this year, we'll have more options available. I absolutely know that that's going to make some people go, well, I'm not ready to yet because that doesn't suit me. But we had to start somewhere, and this is where we've started. So it's probably quite apparent to you. Here's a frame. There's 8 different sections there. Each section pops out really easily, and I'll put this back down and I'll show you what those sections are. I call this a cassette, and each cassette has 2 parts. And when I pull that apart, I'm going to just try and show you this carefully. Maybe I'll just hold up one at a time. You can actually see there,
Yeah.
Mike, there's openings at the bottom of each cell. And it's
Right.
those openings that allow us to harvest honey from the cassette without removing the cappings. So major drama number one, removed. Thank goodness,
Yeah.
because we had something like this. I've got one to show you, a completed one that came out of a hive last week. I'm hoping it hasn't crystallized on us. There's a question you can ask me later. But
Yeah.
yep. But here we have a cassette. It's simply two parts. It comes apart. When we put them in our harvester, we don't remove the cappings. So one of the biggest problems out of my life.
Right.
Then we have a harvester, and it was designed to be small because, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to harvest small amounts of honey quickly. It was designed to be really easy just to carry down to the bee yard, hence a nice big handle. It just feels like a bucket. It's not even that heavy, but it's heavy enough that it sits on top of a beehive or sits on your beehive stand, and it's solid. Like it's not gonna wobble off once it starts moving. And in here, I'm gonna just take it apart a little bit. In here, Mike, is just a small carrier which takes the cassettes. And when I slide the cassettes in there with the cappings facing inwards, the next part of that is it spins for me. And it spins for about 20 seconds. And in that time, apart from it looking absolutely stunning as the honey hits the wall of this container, most of the honey comes out. I would have to say, Mike, at least 70 to 80% of the honey comes out on the first spin. And you'd know what it's like when you have a fresh frame come out of a hive. That honey is really fluid, isn't it? It flows really well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it flows even easier when you're just freshly harvesting. Now, today it should be fine with this one. I don't expect any crystallization since I pulled it out of a hive a week ago. The only thing is we have some tea tree species down here, which is where I know this came from. So sometimes they can surprise us and it can crystallize quite quickly. I think we're at the right time. I think I'm okay. But crystallized honey in the cassettes, like anything, you can't harvest crystallized honey.
Yeah.
So
So what would you do? That's actually on my list of questions. So what do you do? Like we have canola honey here, and canola
yeah.
can crystallize in days. So what would you just push that honey through, or do you wet it and feed it back to your bees?
Yeah, I actually just leave it for the bees, to be honest. And we know that the flora is going to change in the area, and they'll be able to use that. That might mean that honey's locked up for a bit and you can't use it for some time. But one thing I'm still learning about, Mike, I'm curious on your opinion here actually, is once we've finished with a cassette and it's apart, the current, and it's a result of the current design. The next design is quite different to this. We've obviously learnt a lot in the last 9 months of our Australian summer. Is with this current design, we get quite a bit of beeswax on here, and that's just to do with the manufacturing process for this prototype. It wasn't as perfect as we're hoping, but there's a lot of beeswax. So what I've been doing is after harvesting, I put these back into the lid of the hive, just in the lid sitting on top, and the bees clean it out. Now that answers probably another question, is the cappings. The bees just chew through the cappings in a day, repurpose that beeswax, and anything left on the back here also gets reused by the bees. Can sometimes take a bit longer because sometimes it's a bit more propolis-like than it is beeswax-like. But I'm wondering, if I had crystallized honey in here, do you think I could put that in the top of the hive? And if it's oriented not how they normally have it, do you reckon they would go in there and relocate it into the rest of the hive?
Yeah, I think they absolutely would. Yeah, just like if you had a spill of honey, they're on it right away. My only and I hadn't thought about that as a thing. I thought you'd put it back in the frame and then put it back in, but that makes sense because I do that with my frames right now.
Yes.
With but does propolization occur with those cartridges? Like, do they get stuck together at all, or?
As I was saying, sort of started to mention, this surface in the way it was machined when we got this prototype built, it's really quite rough, and they decided that they would put lots of beeswax and propolis there to say, Simon, you didn't make this smooth enough for us. We're putting that there now. Now, that's not the problem with the next version that's coming through. That's a whole different approach. So there will be always some beeswax there, and that is, or
Yeah.
propolis beeswax. There's quite, actually, I can probably show it to you. Will it show up on here? I don't know. Oh, you can sort of see when I do that, you can actually see through. See, there's a little bit of light
Right.
flickering. So there's actually quite a
Yeah.
big gap in there. And of course, we all know what bees do with gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I look at this here and I go, wow, that's actually quite a big gap. Like there's probably a 0.5 millimeter gap in a lot of those. And we've worked hard on the next version to really bring that tolerance right down so that there's hardly anything. It's not so bad that there's a little
Right.
gap, but we certainly don't want it as much as there is here. So we think we're okay with the propolis side of things. We're waiting to see the next version, how much propolis or how much beeswax is in there. But we've changed a bit of the cassette design so that, and I'm going to show it, I'll show you a harvest in a minute. But with this current design, to push these apart, you absolutely can feel the pressure of the beeswax or the propolis, and it's a bit of for some people, they wouldn't like that. So for the next version, we've actually got, and we'll use this pen as an example, we've actually got a key that just slots in here, quarter turn, and pops
Okay.
these open. Because we noticed from our
Right.
testing that was tricky for some people. I don't find it too hard, but some people are just like, no, my hands don't feel like doing that, and I can understand. So we've got a key for that
Yeah.
next bit, so it pops it apart. And then if they don't fit back together perfectly, because sometimes there might be a little bit of beeswax there, that's where I've been putting them in the lid of the hive for a day or two. They get cleaned up. This is after, and think of it too, there's a bit of stickiness in there from the honey harvest. They clean it
Right.
all up, remove the cappings, clean anything, and they fit back together nicely after that.
Nice.
Any thoughts or questions before I show you what's happening here?
What did I have there? So, cupping means okay. Yeah, no, that works. Yeah, I think we actually covered probably four of my questions in that couple of minutes there. So that's perfect.
Oh, excellent. Well, just interrupt as you like and we can work through it. But I might show you a harvest. I'll move it across in front of me in a minute. But there's a nice front cassette.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want to make sure it's mostly capped, as you can see this one is. You can also see there's a few little bits that stick out a bit. And all I'm going to do is put my hand here and push it apart. In fact, it's coming apart really nicely. I don't quite get the camera angle right, but there's a little bit of gooiness, which makes sense. But
Yeah.
it doesn't drip out. It holds quite well. But obviously, once you get it into the harvester, it's ready for the next bit. I'm just going to bring this, and I can probably do it there. So I'm going to slide this in. As I said, we don't want to do it. We need the cappings facing inwards. Great, I've got that where it needs to, maybe that's a good spot for it. I'm going to put the lid on. I've used my prototype harvester so much that the lid now sometimes doesn't like to fit on as neat as it could have in the past. In fact, I think it's the angle that I'm coming at it from. All right, let me just get this in position so you're seeing it at its finest. So I'll just put it there. No crazy reflection on it. I'll just adjust it. I'm going to push the button once, and this is my favourite bit. Let's have a look.
Nice.
And I'm sure it looks lovely to you there, but it is stunning to watch here. My daughter just is mesmerised by it every single time. And when you show people this in real life, they just go, oh. So one thing that was important to me, well, important, but I wasn't sure we'd actually make it work, Mike, was I still wanted the honey harvest to be an experience, because it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's that attachment to it. Now, I didn't like the whole day experience of harvesting, but this now is a different experience and indeed a lovely one. I'm going to push it one more time, so that stopped automatically after 20 seconds. I'm just going to let it go one more time.
It's really quiet.
It is, it's very quiet, to be honest.
Yeah.
We ended up
And I think
sliding.
there's a lot of beekeepers out there who would probably like to get some of their friends a little more involved in the process. So this makes that more accessible to a lot of those people. So there's a lot of pluses to this. I also we discussed, the potential of, at a farmer's market or something, although,
Yeah,
that's kind of almost industrial use at that point. But I think it would draw people to their booths. I think that having something that's moving in your booth will draw people towards it, and it looks amazing as it runs.
I completely agree, and I hadn't thought so much about that scenario until you brought it up on email the other day, and I thought, wow, yeah, and it sort of made sense straight away because we keep having people say to us, rather than friends and family just getting a little bit of honey from us every now and again, they can actually be part of the process because we can harvest fresh honey in front of their eyes as we then put it next to some cheese and biscuits when we're there with them, and
Yeah.
um, that's a pretty unique experience. That's a
Yeah.
pretty nice experience to have for people. Anyway, I'd love to show you in here now. So I'm just going to take that off. It comes apart pretty easily. So I'm just going to pull that centre part out, and there's nothing dripping out of there. I'll hold it up. There's nothing going to drip out of there because, to be honest, it's been very thorough. I can see, oh, there'd be 5% left in there, Mike. I think is fair to say. It's probably harder to show you, but that's my thought. And then this comes off the base. We'll put that out of the way. So now you're just down to a bowl with a handle. And the thing I wanted to show you, and it's always awkward over camera, is, oh, the smell. Is I
Yeah.
wanted to try to point out to you bits of beeswax. Now I can see a tiny bit down there. I can see another little bit there, and I'm just pointing back to the frame here. Sometimes just between the frame and the cassette around that edge is the tiniest little line of propolis. So I can see a tiny little bit there, but it's so fine. You and I and most beekeepers wouldn't even think of that as anything to worry about. And then when I just look around here, is that a little, oh, it's not even a chunk. It looked like one. But I just wanted to show you that. Now, the other thing is it probably doesn't look like a lot. But what's surprising, as you know, when you go to clean out a honey extractor and you start scraping down the walls with something, it just keeps on coming and coming and coming. These cassette pairs have about 150 grams. Oh, I think we've got it, the next version, up to about 160 grams. And when it comes
So that's
across,
per cassette pair. That's per. Okay.
so we've got about 1.4, 1.45 kilograms worth of storage in one full frame. So across, I'll just put that out the way. So across this whole frame, I know that's quite a bit less than the average Langstroth frame if you were to harvest it.
Oh yeah.
There's obviously some real estate on the frame where the bees can't use. And also they can build it out a bit. Actually, how do I show you that? Maybe you can see sort of the widths. We've been encouraged to try to create a cassette that actually comes out further, but we might do some R&D on that before we get too carried away. But they do.
I actually had that as a question too.
Oh, yeah, what was your question? Let me hear your question.
I was just going to be, if you're, for those people that like to use 8 or 9 frames in their honey supers, if you spread that apart, will the bees draw it out further, that like beyond the limits of that frame? And you just answered that, I think.
Well, they absolutely can, but it might actually be, you might find it's actually easier for those that put less frames in to allow that to come out. It might actually be just easy to have. If it's a 10 frame box, for example, just have 10 frames in there instead of 9 or less when you're using this method. But really, that's beekeeper choice. The few times I've had I've had some comb sort of cross between the two, sort of bridge across, it still pops out beautifully and it still slots in. And the only maintenance I've had, well, the only downside of that, if you call it that, is, and I might be able to, oh, not really. There's a little groove. How do I show you that? There's a little groove here where the cassette slides into. That just gets a little bit of propolis in it. So a hive tool, or a pen, in this instance a pen, just because it's right in front of me, and that little bit of beeswax is out. But this doesn't really get dirty other than that. And in terms of other maintenance on the actual equipment, it's just washing this bowl out. Do you remember how I said before I wanted to reduce the time cleaning up afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, once I take the honey out of this, which I might just, I don't think anyone needs to necessarily see that. This is a 30-second clean with warm water.
What a difference.
Warm water and a cloth. And that's all I do. I don't even, people say, can we put it in the dishwasher? And I say, I don't think you'd want to, because it's just so easy to clean otherwise. And it takes up so much space in the dishwasher. I don't think it's worth worrying about. But if I went to my sink over here with warm water, I would clean that in 30 seconds. It's just such an easy thing. And the other maintenance items that I wanted to bring up was, we've talked about it already, but I just want to say it again. After you've harvested, the cappings are there. This is the one we just harvested. The bees will clean that up really quickly. Give them back these for a day in the lid of the hive, and they'll be clean. Or that'll clean up that side as well if you need it. But if they are going to fit back together nicely and you put them back into the frame, there's absolutely no worries about them cleaning, knowing that they're empty, and they'll go in there and clean them up.
Okay, so they'll recognize that those cells are empty and uncap them and use them again.
They are genius bees, aren't they, Mike?
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day I learn something new, fascinating.
They'll be right onto that, and within a day they'll have them cleaned up.
Wow. Okay, that's
cool. It's really quite quick. I've done experiments in the top, mainly in the top of my hive, because of just the way I've been working with what I've got this year. When I put them in the top of the hive, those cappings are cleared by the time I go back the next day.
So are those beeswax coated when you supply them, or do the bees have to get in there? Like, do they need encouragement to get in there and coat them?
Yep. Yeah, so we're not going to hide from that at all, Mike. We know that plastic takes more effort for bees to get interested. That would be your experience. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So we did coat these with beeswax, a very fine spray, before we put them in.
Okay.
Yet, because we had a terrible season here in Southeast Australia, for us, it was actually really hard to complete some of our tests because there was just not much honey coming in anywhere. But and you know what happened was, a lot of the beeswax that was on here was taken by the bees and repurposed. We couldn't believe our eyes when we saw that happening. And we knew, because there was a cover or coating over all of the frame. You could see it as you would see a beeswax coating, and it was all removed. And then I've replaced some of these cassettes since then with ones that didn't have, like this one here doesn't have a coating on it.
Right.
And really it relies on a good nectar flow, and they will fill. But yes, Mike, I can't say it any other way. It takes longer for the bees the first time they use this for them to show interest, and before they're going to start putting nectar in there. And if you were going to, suggest to your customers that, hey, this is something that they could try, I would be wanting you to say that to them, because I think the last thing we want is people to feel let down and go, hang on, it didn't work how I thought it would. Well, using plastic always takes longer the first time. And all I would be doing is rubbing on some beeswax. We've looked at the options of how we could treat them before they come out. We could send them globally. We can do it, but some people have said, I prefer to do it myself. And that comes from the place of they want to be really sure of their beeswax, and I understand that. I mean, Australia's got amazing quality, just about everything, but and beeswax no exception there. But all I'd be suggesting, I'll turn it over, is people rub some beeswax on there. They've just got a solid bit of beeswax, rub it on there, will be enough. And it will still take time. For example, I've seen honey frames, or frames in the honey super, fill up first, the beeswax ones, before they'll go on to ours. So it'd be important to share that with people, to say, hey, when this is new, it's going to take some time. But once they do it, I've got someone currently filling frames for me, and they're up on grey box, which is one of our eucalyptus species, and it's filling up in a week, and I can't believe it. Well, I can believe it, because we know what happens when there's a good nectar flow on, don't we? And it's just amazing that he keeps on sending back more frames full of cassettes full of honey for me, about every 10 days to 2 weeks at the moment. That won't last much longer.
Wow.
I've shown you a lot here, and I've talked a lot, Mike. I probably should let you ask some questions, or what do you think your customers might be thinking?
The first question would be about warranty. How long is the warranty?
So standard warranty is 1 year. We haven't worked on anything different to that at this particular stage. And that would be a replacement warranty, assuming there's something wrong at our end. If there is mistreatment, well, we can help you get parts replaced. But if it's something to do with our end, it's really important we sort that out for you. So much so that just yesterday I went and visited one of our potential production partners who have the ability to do this for us. And this is here in Australia too, which was great because so often people think you're going to do everything offshore. This particular company has amazing quality control. Like I want to be able to come to you and say, here's something that's great, but I don't know unless I see it and feel it from the partners that we're involved with. And yesterday I just went, wow, if we were to choose this partner, I think we would have a very low fail rate. There's always one in a 200 or something, but I thought, wow, this is going to be a really great outcome to work with a company like this. And I wasn't sure what that would be like, but I'd like to think we could provide something which certainly lasts well out there in the field for your beekeepers.
So this will be a made in Australia product,
Let's withhold
or that's
answering that
the
in totality, but I would like to think so. I'm really conscious of beekeepers and pricing as well. So it might well
right.
be, we know that assembly is happening here in Australia. We know that the electronics are happening here in Australia. It's likely that we'll be able to source some of our componentry elsewhere and pull it all together here in Australia, which technically means it's a made in Australia product, but I
Right.
just want to
Yeah.
be open with you about that.
And then you had mentioned parts. So if somebody drops the clear part, that's something that we'd be able to. Okay, cool.
And you're saying like being able to replace parts. I don't have like a system set up for that yet, Mike, obviously because we haven't even
No, you
manufactured
wouldn't.
anything.
Yeah.
But just
Yeah.
talking yesterday with this manufacturing company, I see that that's not a challenge. To be able to say in the future, sell that through our website or through a supplier like yourself, provide the most common parts that need replacement. I'm sure there's always going to be something. We want to make that accessible. We certainly,
Yeah.
I know beekeepers. I know how we work with things. I know sometimes we break things. We break
Yep.
things. You don't.
Yeah.
There'll
How
be
many hive
times,
tools have you lost? Yep.
yeah, people will, yeah, you drop things on the ground and they're gone forever. I get
Yeah.
it. I get it.
Is is the battery replaceable?
No, it's not. Though we know how many cycles that this battery can have. There's no user serviceable parts inside this.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
What we did with the battery, we're limited by space. We've got more space in there. We could probably increase capacity, but we said, look, if the battery can fully harvest 2 complete frames full of cassettes, that would be a really good, a good thing to aim for. Well, we're above that. We know we can harvest probably about 20 cassettes before the battery runs out. But the other thing too, Mike, is it just is a USB-C charge point on the back here. You can leave it plugged in. Do you know what I did actually out in the field not long ago? I just had a battery pack plugged into the back of this.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
really low power requirements. Yes, there's a motor in there, but it's still very low requirements for power. It's worked out really well.
Right.
Better than we thought, actually.
Cool. Yeah. Um, those frames, I've seen other manufacturers that make a plastic one-piece frame, and the part is like, as I'm pointing to it, as though you can see where I'm pointing. But on the edges on theirs, it's a small hive beetle resistant frame. It kind of looks like this would almost be along those lines. I don't see any openings or anything in there where small hive beetles can lay, which
No,
is
we
which is
small
not that it's going to be a big deal, but I just thought that was kind of a little bit of a plus in
I,
there.
I think it's important you ask that sort of question. Now, we've made some changes to this frame design for a few reasons, but all of it will still be to the point where there's not going to be places accessible to small hive beetle. I mean, I guess they can go into these cassette cells, of course, but
Right. Yeah.
these will sort them out. But we didn't want there to be anywhere else. We are changing a few things. We're making these sections here will be a bit thinner and narrower. There'll be a bit more bulk down this side edge, but that'll all be blocked in. So there's
Okay.
no spot there. One thing that someone said to me, and I couldn't believe it got past my testing to begin with, but they said, Simon, these rounded edges are really annoying. because when I pick up this and I go to put it down on something, it wants to slide out every time. It wants to hit. I'm like, oh, why didn't we? I didn't notice that.
I never, yeah, I
Sharpen
wouldn't have thought of that either.
those edges so that when they sit on something, they actually doesn't want to move. And the same person said, Simon, you've got this lovely groove here, which is easy to grab with your gloves on, but it stops just short of the end. Can we just get it through to the end so we can actually feel it right up to? Because you grab it, you want to be able to grab it however suits you. So,
right.
Small hive beetle, we don't want that.
I love the idea of not uncapping because then there's less work for the bees.
And just that filtering as
address
well. Like such a low level of filtering, like no filtering really required when I look back in there. If you know what you might do, Mike, and I'm sitting at my kitchen, so I make it easy. If there's something too big, gone. That's filtering.
Yeah. Right.
Filtering,
Gotcha.
Filtering complete.
I like that. 8 or 9 frames. Like the idea that there's no heavy lifting because you don't have to go out and pull the whole honey super. You can just pull out a frame at a time.
And this is actually, I'll make a point there, Mike, and that is I wonder how it would go. This is my question to myself 9 months ago. How easy is it to harvest honey during a normal hive inspection? So you need to go out there. It's a nice summer day. You wanted to check what's going on. If this was back assembled how you saw it before, we know it's just an easy carry down with us. It's easy to get to your bees. Could you easily just harvest honey off to the side while doing your inspection? And I think we can. We've got a lid to go on the top to keep the bees out as you do it. Obviously, if it's robbing season, they might get a bit more interested in looking in there and sniffing around, and you might just have to move away a little bit. But we wanted to make it so that you could feel like you could go out to your bees, do your normal inspection and take some honey. And you might only take 2. Well, actually, that's a good point, is we know that the bees lay or put honey here in a pattern, in a common pattern that sort of starts central and moves out. Well, it might be that you've only got a few of these internal frames ready, and then you can just harvest 1 or 2 or 3 cassettes at a time rather than feeling like you've got to harvest the whole thing. And that's what used to drive me crazy, Mike, is thinking I'm only going to set up all that old gear, all the original harvesting equipment, if I have lots of honey to harvest. So that might happen once or twice a season, whereas with this, you could harvest small amounts often, taking away that whole demand of feeling like you have to harvest huge quantities at once to make it worth the effort.
Yeah, you could actually be more specific with what you're harvesting. So if there's something in bloom for a couple of weeks, that's what's sitting in there.
Oh, exactly. And that's what's happened here is we knew what we were probably going to get, and because of what was in bloom when this filled up. And absolutely, it's tea tree. It's actually not my favorite. It smells good, but it's not my favorite honey to eat. But you just get what the environment is there to give you, and that's kind of exciting too, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things here. There's a lot of pain points that this if I was starting out as a beekeeper, there's a lot of pain points in here that this solves. Like, you're not having to handle wax because wax requires, well, as you know, there's a lot of processing that needs to happen for your wax, and then the cleanup after you're done, because if you're done extracting, you've already busted your butt that day hauling heavy boxes around, and the last thing you want to do is start doing cleanup. So that's often the next day. And here, last year I ran into an issue where I wasn't feeling well the next day. So a couple of days later, I go out and everything's crystallized on the bottom of my extractor. So that's no good either. But this would solve a lot of problems, and I think it's a cool little device. I think it's a neat thing. I would use that myself.
Thank you. I certainly do appreciate hearing that. And of course, we're not trying to solve everyone's problems. We're not trying to. This doesn't fit it's not sensible to try to think you're going to use this for 10 hives, 50 hives, 100 hives. It's not what we were trying to aim for. But I will we'll just go on for a couple of minutes more only, and then we'll wrap it up, Mike. But what we are aware of is what can we do here in the commercial honey space? And you're probably already thinking, or someone listening to this might go, we're not harvesting honey like that in the commercial. We're not harvesting 50 tons of honey like this. But what if they didn't have to? What if all that the commercial honey producer had to do was provide the cassette full of delicious, fresh, beautifully capped honey, and all they had to do was put this in a little container, label it, and send that off to the consumer, and the consumer, the honey lover, had their own little benchtop harvesting device in their own home.
Kind of cool. That's a neat idea. I also think commercial people might be into it to, as a display
Yeah,
for their friends that come over that might not necessarily want to go out to a bee yard, but just to be a part of that process. So I agree. It's not going to be something where commercial beekeepers are going to be harvesting honey from, but it
no.
is something that could add value to their to what it is that they're doing, to the products that they're offering.
Exactly, and I do wonder if we're starting trials here next spring. It's coming into what are we, March? So we've just started our fall over here, or autumn, and next spring we're starting to test these with commercial beekeepers to see sort of how hands-on it feels to them and whether they enjoy it. But to be able to send honey out to a consumer who has the experience of harvesting honey in their own home without having bees themselves, and experiencing premium quality honeys that are still capped and never oxidized with the air, is a really interesting thought. But look, that's the future. That's not tomorrow. That's not our crowdfunding launch in 2 weeks on the 25th of March in your
25th.
jurisdiction. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, there you go, Mike. What a great conversation. Thanks for listening to me and hearing me out. Is there anything that you think might be a question your people would want to hear that we might have missed, or you think we've pretty much got it?
I think we've pretty much covered everything that I have on my list here. I think yeah, I think we're good. That was pretty good. I understand you're planning to ship in October is what the Kickstarter goal is. So it might be something where some planning, but great for us for next spring. I think I think there's a lot of there are a lot of pluses to this. I think this is a great idea, and I think that there's I can see nothing but potential for something like this. I think it's an amazing idea, and you've done a really good job there, Simon.
Really appreciate hearing from you and having you say that, Mike. Much appreciated, and looking forward to getting it to you so you can have a go and see what it's like and get more feedback from you. I guess so. Finally, I'll just mention that if there's people listening that do want to get onto the crowdfunding list so that they're ready for that, our wait list is at hivekeepers.com, where they can sign up to that, where they'll get kept up to date. From the point of 25th of March onwards, they'll be able to get directed to the crowdfunding website from hivekeepers.com, and they can see what we're doing there. And hopefully we've been able to help some people with their decision making. But Mike, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate being here with you today.
It's nice chatting with you, Simon. Nice to meet you.
Thanks indeed, Mike. Cheers.
Bye bye.